Hi everyone, it's Abdullah Samir. I want to reflect on what has happened since the Christchurch Massacre. So just to look at what's happening in the world today is there are quite a few attacks happening, and we need to be cognizant of the fact that, well, starting back in 2011 with Anders Breivik, who went and killed a bunch of people, a lot of them were Muslims actually and refugees, and so that was one big attack that happened. In the U.S. in August 2016, a New York imam and his associate were shot and killed. Police say it was a hate crime, so that was that. In Switzerland, a 30-year-old man entered the mosque and started firing at them. Okay, in Canada, this is still in our minds. This man came into the mosque and killed 6 Muslim worshippers as they were praying, and not hurting anybody, not doing anything, and he just killed them in cold blood. And there's a few more incidents. UK, a man drove into a group of Muslims as they just came out of the mosque, right? And he said, "I want to kill all Muslims," right? That's what he said. And then the last major one was in New Zealand, where 50 people were killed, and that's what we're talking about today. So there's definitely a list that seems to be growing, and Muslims are being targeted. Even though Muslims are a diverse group of different people, they all don't believe the same thing. They don't all believe in jihad. They don't all believe in Sharia law. They all have different views all over the place, right? So as a self-reflecting society, we have done a couple of things. But before we get there, we have to admit that Islam does have a problem. If we are looking at as a society and saying, what did we do wrong for this to happen? Like Islam, meaning the Islamic texts, Muslims need to acknowledge that there's something wrong there too. If you look at the list of terrorist attacks, Islamic inspired ones, there's a big list of them, right? And it's a much bigger list than the ones targeting Muslims, and it keeps happening, right? So we definitely, as the Muslim society, needs to reflect and say, why does this keep happening? Is it just because of colonialism, or is it something else? Like, is there more to it than Islam and than just this? Because why is it that these are all Islamic inspired attacks, right? So obviously Islam is part of it. We can't say it has nothing to do with Islam. It has something to do with Islam, right? And one such imam who has done something about this his name is Hamza Yusuf, and he's written an article called "The Plague Within," where in this article he says there's a plague in the Muslim community, right? He calls it a new version of an ancient faith because he believes that basically Salafism is a problem, although he doesn't name it, right? He says Imam Adel al-Kalbani, who led prayers in the Haram of Mecca for several years, has publicly stated that these youth, he's talking about these terrorist youth, are the bitter harvest of teachings that have emanated from pulpits throughout the Arabian Peninsula, teachings that have permeated all corners of the world, teachings that focused on hatred, exclusivity, provincialism, and xenophobia. These teachings, so basically he's saying these teachings against any Muslim who does not share the simple-minded, literalist, anti-metaphysical, primitive, and impoverished version of Islam, and reject the immense body of Islamic scholarship. So from his perspective, this is like an innovation. This is a new thing in Islam to kind of, in a very black and white way, go by the black and white text rather than looking at the rules and the goals of the religion, right? And he's saying that because of funding and these teachings have flooded bookstores throughout the Muslim world, and even America, Europe, and Australia, right? So basically, he's saying this is caused by like radical teachings which are hateful and against basically what he considers to be the primary goals of Sharia, right? The maqasid of Sharia, right? So anyways, that being said, so there are people who are reflecting in the Muslim community and do want this to change. Obviously, he thinks his version of Islam is much better, which is basically what they call traditional Islam to distinguish it from Salafi Islam. So obviously not all Muslims are on the same page. Like, they don't all agree with what's happening, the terrorist attacks and all that. And thankfully that there are Muslims, and he's a major scholar. He's a representative of Orthodox Sunni Muslims, and he's written about this. This was many years ago, right? There's also so Muslims have been dealing with this in some way, right? There's also the letter to Baghdadi, which was signed by hundreds and hundreds of Muslim scholars that have denounced ISIS and the interpretation of Islam. So clearly these guys don't like their version of Islam, but as honest intellectual people, we have to say there is a problem in the Islamic texts that is leading to this, right? Like, what does an extreme Jain do? He fasts or she fasts to death, right? What does an extreme like Muslim do? Like, you know what they do, right? So basically, like, what I wanted to, like, if you look at, for example, this article, this little girl died, right, from doing too much fasting, right? So like, what we see is that this is what extreme. So obviously, ideology has something to do with it. We definitely don't want to implicate all Muslims, but we do have to say there's a problem with the Islamic texts, right? There's something in there that is very dangerous. And if God really exists, he left this religion in a big mess, right? If Allah is a true God, right? So that's one thing. So we talked about reflections of Muslim scholars. So one of the other things that happened was my fellow atheist activist, Armin Nawabi, his talk was blocked, was canceled. He was deplatformed, all because of what happened. And I guess in a sense, they're blaming him for this. He was deplatformed. He was going to talk about the case against Islamic reform. So he believes Islam cannot be reformed. And this is a discussion that we should have. We should have this conversation. I actually disagree with him. But like, if we can't have these conversations, people are just going to think what they're going to think. And we're just going to be pushing it underground. And we're going to be enabling more extremism. Because if you don't have in the centers of learning, we don't have these conversations, we can't move forward. If we can't have these conversations, we can't move forward as a society. And this is very unfortunate. The Atheist Society of Calgary feels to cancel this event communicates to terrorists in general that these tactics will accomplish their objectives, right? So this is honestly quite unfortunate, because I do feel that Armin has done a lot, and he definitely is someone that believes in the rights of Muslims to practice the religion. He's definitely someone that believes in freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of conscience. But to deplatform him, it's just going to make the situation worse, because we need to have these conversations, right? New Zealand, again, has been trying to do things that are actually... So the goal of this is to show that Muslims are not the other, that we're all together. And this is something that terrorists definitely don't want on both sides. They don't like this. And so, they observed a Muslim call to prayer, and then they had a minute of silence. I'm personally concerned. I feel like this type of thing is actually going to cause a lot more backlash from the creeping Sharia people, and they're going to think like, oh, this is bad. I do say that the intention of this was good, right? Unfortunately, the call to prayer is kind of controversial, and it's being used sometimes to silence people. Like in Indonesia, a Buddhist woman complained about the adhan, the call to prayer, being too loud, and she was charged for blasphemy. So this is something that, like, it's kind of unfortunate. I think the call to prayer is something that, due to its nature, being blasted, people kind of don't like it. And again, I feel like maybe this wasn't the best thing to do, but again, we can disagree on that, because it did come from a good place, right? The other thing is that the Muslim community several groups were encouraging the Muslim community to wear headscarves, right? To wear hijab. The Islamic Women's Rights Council was doing that, and there was other the Muslim Association president also said that this is something good, that this should be done. I do think that this is problematic, because people don't realize that the headscarf is not something that all Muslims wear. And it's a symbol of the religion that is actually used to oppress women in some countries. So if you're in the West, you're a Western Muslim woman, or a Western person in general, you may not realize that in this privileged society that women in general do have a choice to wear or not wear. But in many Muslim countries, they don't have a choice about whether they can wear it or not wear it, right? So this is actually kind of, going against Muslim women that don't want to wear the hijab. And for example, there's a movement by this woman that in Masih al-Najad in Iran, to highlight to people just how difficult it is that in Iran.
It's a punishable crime to be unveiled in public. According to the laws, Sharia laws in Iran, you get lashes. You get jailed and fined. But more important than this, you won't be allowed to get an education from the age of 7 if you take off your headscarf. You won't be allowed to get a job. You won't be allowed to live in your own country.
Oh, this is an example of a woman that is showing like how bad it is if you don't wear the hijab. Here's one of the clips. So this is a woman that is, being attacked because her hijab was taken off. And there's tons of videos like this. You can see where women are shamed, they're shouted at, attacked sometimes in public by either other women, Iranian women, or sometimes men, saying, "Shame on you! You shouldn't dress like that. You shouldn't. You're a shame on the society or whatever." So this is what some Muslim women have to go through. So it's unfortunate that on one hand they chose to cover themselves, even though it comes from a good place, and I have to keep saying that this should be seen by the Muslim community as something quite amazing, that these women are willing to cover their hair to show solidarity with Muslims. But just remember that not all Muslim women, see this as a something that is good, right? And so that's something that I think was unfortunately not a good decision. Now, the other thing that happened, which is quite again completely over the top, is Jordan Peterson his book was pulled from New Zealand shelves. Now I've read his book in full, and he's quite a controversial figure, but there's nothing in his book that could in any way be connected to this shooting. It's a self-help book. And this is an example of overreacting, right? Like it seems like the reason why his book was pulled was because of this photo he took with the "I'm a proud Islamophobe." The guy has a shirt on. Now, maybe he didn't notice the shirt. Maybe he didn't think about it. Maybe he didn't realize how bad press this would be. Or maybe he respected the guy's freedom of expression. It doesn't mean he agrees with Islamophobia, right? So the fact that they pulled this official statement was 12 Rules for Life is currently unavailable, which is a decision that Whit Cools has made in light of some extremely disturbing material being circulated prior, during, and after the Christchurch attacks. Right? So basically, this is a major book chain, I guess similar to Chapters in Canada and America, that has pulled his books from the shelves, all because it seems because of this one photo he took. I mean, this is so absurd and so ridiculous that he's being deplatformed because of this. And it's just silly, right? And as well, it seems like there's something else that happened to him, was his fellowship from Cambridge University has been withdrawn. Again, no official explanation was given to him as to why this happened. But just because if this is all happening because of this and because of the attacks, I mean, this is ridiculous. This is completely ridiculous. All because of a photo? I mean, if that's not the case, then explain why his fellowship was pulled and why his books are being pulled from shelves. We should get a proper explanation for this, because this sort of censorship and deplatforming, I don't think this is healthy for society. I don't think this is good for society. I don't agree with everything Jordan Peterson says. I definitely don't think that wearing a shirt like "I'm a proud Islamophobe" is a good idea and is in good taste. But again, it's a t-shirt, right? Obviously this guy has taken one particular interpretation of version of Islam and said this is the only one, and I'm against that. And again, I don't think it's necessarily in good taste. But to deplatform the guy all because of that is honestly absurd and ridiculous. So going, in a nutshell, to go over everything that I said, yes, there's been a lot of, Muslim attacks, and we don't want more attacks against Muslims. So it's good that we're reflecting. We need to have more conversations about this. All of these things that were done have been, and I feel, have come from a good place from the New Zealanders. And I think it's a good thing in general that what they're trying to do. I do think that the Muslim community also needs to reflect on why this keeps happening and why there's such a big problem. Like, what is the problem in the Islamic text that is causing so many things to happen? You have to admit there has to be something in Islam, or at least a particular interpretation of Islam. And even Hamza Yusuf himself has admitted this, that there is certain interpretations of Islam which are toxic and hateful. And, this is what's causing the problems in the world today. Again, to some of the things that were done, wearing hijab in solidarity, I don't think it was a good decision. And I think that something else could have been done. We don't wear the Jewish hat in solidarity whenever a synagogue is attacked. So I don't think this is necessarily a good decision, because it alienates women who are forced to wear hijab, who are oppressed because of the hijab. And I just want to thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more videos. And if you're new, please subscribe. I'm an ex-Muslim, and I'm talking about Islam and Muslims and related topics. And this is going to be my vlogging style I'm doing now. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye.